Alright, so this is Nat, and this is Aiden, and we are about to go to the Weird Museum.
Hey y'all, it's Astraeus, and as you just heard, I went to the Weird Museum in Austin a couple weeks ago, and today I want to talk about it. So, if you don't know what the Weird Museum is, it's this museum on 6th Street in Austin that has a whole bunch of weird stuff. So, it's kind of like those old. It's kind of like what you would consider like a sideshow or a freak show, sort of. It has a lot of those, like, two-headed animals, and like jackalopes and like, stuff that obviously doesn't exist, it's faked and everything, but it's like fun to look at. And I called them dime museums back in the day, and they kind of started to fade away around the 1920s, and this is one of the ones that is open, kind of bringing it back. And it's super interesting, and I actually lived north of Austin for 4 whole years and never heard of this place. And it took the pandemic and listening to podcasts to hear about it. And so I was super excited to have the opportunity to go, and I got to go with my 2 friends, as you saw, Aiden and Nat. And it was an interesting time, and I wanted to show you some of it. So, to give you some background on the place, it's kind of interesting. So it actually didn't start as a museum at all. It started as a, gifts shop store called Lucky Lizard's Curios and Gifts in 2005. And then they actually had lizards there at the time, and, a whole bunch of weird stuff for sale. So they had the owner, he would bring in all this weird stuff and had it in the back of the store in this back area building where the museum is now today. And as the things were being sold, he was realizing that he was letting go of a lot of stuff that was one of a kind, and he was never going to be able to get it back. And also he started to realize, or his wife started to realize, that people would come into the store just to go look in the back and see the weird stuff, and they wouldn't buy anything. So I guess his wife jokingly said to him one day, was like, you should charge admission for this place, people are just coming in to look. And he took that seriously. And in 2007, it actually finally became a bona fide museum. Their mission, according to the website, is the mission Steve had in mind when opening the Museum of the Weird was not only to preserve this disappearing part of Americana, the dime museum, the sideshow, and the roadside attractions, but also to give people a chance to wonder again. Could this artifact be real? Is it a clever fabrication? Are these stories true, or are they simply concocted to entertain, frighten, amaze us? And so that's their mission. And I said they did a pretty good job from my experience with it. My friends that came with me, they were good sports about it. I'm definitely a lot more into the weird, spooky, paranormal stuff than they are, but they were great. So when you first walk into this store museum thing, it's a little nondescript. You walk in and it's kind of just looks like a run-of-the-mill souvenir shop that doesn't have that much inventory. There were shirts and stuff for sale, and a couple posters and that kind of thing, and then a Bigfoot in the corner just chilling, and then of course turnstiles. So they were great with COVID precautions and everything. We had to wait around in the store for a little while because they were only letting a couple groups back at a time to go through the museum, which was great. And eventually he gave us the go ahead, and we went ahead and went through the turnstiles. And then when you first walk in, it's not as exciting as I thought it would be. They hit you with lesser things. I guess it's a more of a build-up situation. So there's wax figurines and that kind of thing. There was this mermaid next to a wax figurine that I assume would be normally in sideshows and stuff. But things started to get a lot weirder and freakier the further you go into it. So going into this, I had heard about a couple of the things that were in this museum ahead of time, but I didn't realize how many of the objects and the things I would recognize from reading and listening to different stories and that kind of thing. It actually had a lot of famous artifacts, which was really, really cool, and also a lot more human remains than I expected. So when you're walking through, there's like this real mummy, or if you want to believe it's real. So if you want to believe it's real, because, you know, all of this stuff could be made up. I totally get that. This could all be fabricated and completely fake and just for funsies. But it was still very, very cool. So it claims to be a real-life mummy that was actually found in South America, or I think it might have been Mexico, and it was perfectly preserved by a sandstorm. And so there were a couple of these, and this one was at the Weird Museum, which was really kind of, I don't know, it was like you were walking in and being like, oh, this is all like cool and interesting and spooky, oh, we're gonna, you know, get spooked out, and then there's like an actual human remains that are like not buried anywhere, they're just on display. I don't know, I felt a little bit icked out by it. But there was more than just that. There were actually, I think, 2 mummies, there were some human skulls, there were shrunken heads. As I walked further through, I thought maybe this actually is worth the price of admission, even if I come out with like, you know, some weird vibes or, you know, a ghost attached to me or something. And then you go further in, and then there's like plasters of Bigfoot feet and all this like evidence and sightings and that kind of thing. It had a whole case just devoted to Bigfoot, which I really liked. I am definitely a believer in Bigfoot. There was a replica of a crashed alien out in Texas, which was kind of cool, linking it back to, you know, Austin area and everything. There were like some cool movie props and everything. And then you like walk over and there's this little like box that you could totally miss. It's like in the wall and you have to push a button to turn a light on to look at it. And is the picture of the fairies. So this is one of my favorite things at the museum, because I'd heard of this for a long time, and it's kind of famous if you're into that kind of stuff. So basically it's the Cottingley fairies. So these 2 cousins back in like 1917, they took a bunch of pictures with their one of the dad's like cameras, and they had fairies in the pictures, right? So back then there was not Photoshop or anything like that, and some people like latched onto it and like believed in it, and one of those people was actually Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which if you know anything about him, he was a spiritualist. So he took it as complete proof that fairies were for real. And the sisters, like the public was split on it. Some people totally believed it and bought it, and some people didn't. Well, the sisters remained adamant that it was real, until about the 1980s, when they both admitted that yes, the pictures were fake. One of the cousins stuck to her guns, and she is adamant that that last picture was completely real and it was totally fairies. So what they did is they used these like paper cutouts from one of their children's like books when they were kids, and they cut them out and like were doing stuff with them in the pictures. And so obviously looking at them now, it's totally fake. There's like no question about it. But it was just so cool because they had one of these pictures like in a box, and then they had, of course, the story of it next to it. And I just thought it was fascinating. It was like such a cool experience to see something that I'd heard so much. So one of the other things that was really kind of freaky and gave me weird vibes was this calcified fetus baby. The story claimed that basically a woman had thought she was pregnant, and she was like showing all the signs of being pregnant and everything, and then she ended up dying. When they did an autopsy on her, they found this like calcified baby thing, as you can see in the video. And I don't know, it was just very disturbing to have that there, and it looked kind of like a carving of a baby in like a stone. I don't know, it was a little freaky though, just to like have that story attached to it. So then once you go through all that, you walk outside into like a courtyard. So like the building's almost like in 2 sections with a courtyard in the middle, some stairs that lead up. So when you walk into the courtyard, then right across is the second best part, or maybe the best part, and the reason that I'd heard about this thing at all, and it's the Minnesota Iceman. So this creature is pretty prominent in any person thinking about cryptids or anything like that, studying that kind of thing. It's very prominent, and it was even, there's articles in the Scientific American about this. Anthropologists have looked at this thing, and there's so much controversy around it. Most people say it's a hoax. Probably is a hoax, but it was very, very cool, and the story surrounding it is cool too. So there's like varying ideas about how it was found. but essentially it was a man frozen in a block of ice that was found by someone who was fishing or something like that in Siberia or something. That's kind of the story that surrounds it. And so once it was found, it was taken and it was shown around on sideshows. So it was kept in this like ice block. It has a couple like hairs coming out of the ice block now, so it's probably like melted just a little bit or whatever. But it was taken to sideshows all around the country, and the owner of the Weird Museum, when he was a kid, he was super into Bigfoot and all that kind of stuff. And so his aunt took him to see the Iceman, and he was just transfixed by this thing. And he just stayed there staring at the guy for like hours. And then, you know, he grew up, and then the Iceman was lost. It had rumored to be last owned by Jimmy Stewart, of all people. And just couldn't find it. No one knew where he was. And then somehow the owner of the Weird Museum, he was like looking around and he found it with the original like signage, like the wooden sign that was on the outside of the thing when he went to go see the sideshow. And he bought it at an auction and he brought it to the Weird Museum. So I don't have any footage of the actual Iceman because you're not supposed to take pictures of it. It's supposed to like, it's one thing that's not allowed. Everything else you're allowed to take pictures of, but the Iceman, you gotta save it. So you can look it up online. There might be some pictures. I found a couple that look similar. The other theory about it being a hoax is that there's like different versions of the Iceman. There's like one or two that people have seen. There's different positions that he's being seen in. And one of them, like, you know, he's showing his teeth. The other one, he's not. So probably a hoax, but still really cool. He looks like kind of like a Neanderthal-ish kind of head and face and everything. And it's pretty hairy and it's very disturbing. He actually has one of his eyes is like popped out. Theoretically, one of the stories about how he was found was he was shot while people were hunting in Asia, and then he was frozen in a block of ice later. So, whatever. It was definitely freaky, definitely weird, and one of the main reasons I went to the museum in the first place. Definitely worth checking out. And then you go upstairs, and there's like 2 sections, and I'm telling you, this building's like really, really cool if you just like architecture. Like, it was such an interesting walk to go all the way through it and everything. And so you go upstairs and it's like super weird and like the way it's positioned, but there's a bunch of like a big glass case with a whole bunch of those like weird abnormal animals, you know, like the 2-headed calf or like a real mermaid or some weird fish and things that have things wrong with it, things that shouldn't exist, that kind of thing. So there's like, I think it was a fairy, like a real life fairy, and then there was this random like
Only peeping.
psychic where you like push the button and it tells you all about your future and how the next like year of your life is gonna go. And so of course we tried it out.
Okay. Little town.
The open man was being exhibited imminently shot by a showman by the name of Tom Norman, who hoped to make a fortune. Intrigued saw the elephant man. He immediately recognized he had found a medical phenomenon. He asked that he be brought to his office at London Hospital, but he was not treated enough. Dreams had been reported as a child, and arranged to have him admitted in secret. Mary came there that night. The elephant man had used disguise so he would not be marked by the crowd and seized by the police. He was, in fact, what it proves, as secluded from the world as the man in the eye.
My grandpa's house had it. Great-grandpa's house had a 2-headed cow in the closet.
In the closet?
Didn't know what else to do with it, so it lived in the closet.
Is this the same grandparents that had the aliens crash into their property?
No, but related. Not related, but
He was the most
about
pathetic
so
specimen
near
of
each other.
humanity I had ever seen. That his sole idea was to creep into the
I think that last group was like not paying attention. They had in the
Oh, there's a lady.
Oh yeah.
Alright.
Okay.
This is a cool building.
I know it really is. Why did they build it like this? Yeah. Oh
Ooh, mama. Here we go. Ooh, hola. Orla.
The last thing we saw before we had to walk all the way backstairs and back through the entire museum was this wax museum. So if you've ever been to like Ripley's Believe It or Not, this was like really sad in comparison. But there was some cool stuff, I guess. I don't know, I get freaked out by the wax figures and like that kind of thing because I always feel like they're gonna move, or like my friends were just freaked out they were gonna fall on us because they're so precariously placed like above us in some regions. But like King Kong was cool and Dracula and that kind of thing. But yeah, I highly recommend the Weird Museum if you're interested in paranormal stuff at all and you're around Austin. And of course, it's on 6th Street, so if you need a drink afterwards, there's so many bars just right there. But yeah, a lot of spooky stuff. I would say I'm leaning more towards there was quite a few things that I think were actually real, but there was so much stuff that definitely wasn't, but it was just worth looking at because it was just a fun little gag. I mean, my friends and I had a really fun time doing it. So that's it for all the stuff that I did while I was gone. Next week, I'm probably going to get back more into maybe something science-y, something like that. Haven't really decided yet, so keep an eye out for that. And thanks for watching. I guess that's what I'm into this week.